Hi and welcome back. Derwent watercolor pencils is my test today. I have used them and for the most part they have behaved okay. There's this carmine, burnt carmine that has a crumbly core, but let's see. Light fastness, not fantastic for this set. They have this blue wool scale system where up to 3 is really not good, 4 is the first that is somewhat good, and nearly half of the set is 3 or less. So they can be quite putative. And actually the reds that I'm using here from my red poppy is by and large not very good for light fastness. So if light fastness is a concern, this is not a set to pick. They're quite soft, they lay down nice and easy. And here I'm just putting down a base layer of a mid-tone. I think that was a Scarlet Lake that I used for that. Scarlet Lake, yeah. And I'm going in with a carmine, or they call it madder carmine, to start some of the shading a bit. I'm just layering up and starting out with a base layer, and there's parts that I don't cover from the start because I want to see if I can drag the pigment in from the parts that I have colored in, and I'm trying also to leave some of the edges lighter than the rest. So yeah, but they lay down nicely. They're quite okay for that part. And yeah, it looks kind of pretty. I'm using Pastel matte for this, if I didn't say it already. A light grey tone. And I actually should have probably just picked watercolor paper or a white pastel matte, because these are a little more transparent than I expected them to be. I haven't used them for a while, so I didn't really remember how they were to use. I think it's actually been a whole year since I used them last. So yeah, so I pretty much color the whole thing in for starters to get an idea where I want which colors before I add the first layer, or I wet it the first time. So it looks a little rough here for starters, but don't give up on me yet. It will come together. It's at the ugly stage. It's important when you do this method, where I pretty much just use them as regular colored pencils, except that instead of turbinoids I use water to melt the base layers. And it's important not to use too much water on your brush, because that can make the whole thing kind of runny, and you just want the wax in the pencils to melt down pretty much in place. Maybe blend it out a little bit, but don't want it to run all over the place. So that's why I use a fairly small synthetic brush for this part. And later, at the last time I put on water, I put on a lot more water, because I wanted to make sure that all the parts that hadn't quite melted out the first couple of times did melt, and I wanted things to blend better together at the end. But if you do it too soon, you just risk to get backwashes and stuff, so you need to go in and correct the placement of the pigment. And that doesn't matter which kind of watercolor pencil you use, it goes for all of them. If you use too much water, especially in the beginning, you'll just get all the backgrounds and cauliflowering and stuff, and it won't look very good. Not at least if you want it to look somewhat realistic. You can of course use all of those things as effects if you so desire, but I wanted a somewhat realistic look on this, so I didn't want too bad back washes. So, and I'm kind of just jumping all over the place because I don't want to go in and wet a petal next to one that is already wet. So and I'm trying to stay away from things that are already wet. And I'm not sure how obvious it is from the jumps in here. I leave them, though it's definitely not obvious here. I leave it to dry between one layer and the next. It has to be absolutely dry, otherwise you have no control over how much pigment you get off the pencil, and the lead can become quite crumbly if it gets semi-wet, and that makes it difficult. I know some people use the wet leads in their paintings or drawings. I don't, because I like control over it, and I hate when I have a pencil that I need to do detailing with later and the nib is wet and wet and crumbly and impossible to control. So yeah, I make sure that everything's dry before I add anything else. And here I take, that's actually that burnt carmine I'm using for shading. It's a brownish red that is good for that, for this part, but sharpening it is a nightmare. So but I kept with it and just kept sharpening it until I got something I could use. And yeah, it is just one layer after another, and I ended up using 4 reds, or 5, 4 reds at least. I used Scarlet Lake, I used Crimson Lake, I used both cold and warm, Madder Carmine, Deep Vermilion, and Geranium Lake, plus the carmine, the burnt carmine, which is not really a red, but a brownish red. And the reason why I used all of them was to create some variation in the red, because that kind of makes it look deeper and more interesting than if you just use one color for the whole thing. And yeah, and especially the cold reds I used mostly for shading, and then a little more of it in the shady part of the petals. So yeah, layer, wet, layer, wet, wet, layer, wait. So that's pretty much the story of how this goes. Keep on working on it, and it didn't at any point get to where I had filled up the tooth of the paper, so I couldn't do anymore. The wax really melted out nicely, and it doesn't have, even now that it's finished, it doesn't have a waxy feel to it at all. It's not shiny or nothing. I could have layered another 5 or 10 layers probably without any problems. I just don't think it would have helped my painting. It wouldn't have gotten any better if I had added more layers. So yeah, for the rest of this I'll find some music for you, and the last comments is at the end of the video. I got my final thoughts back there. So enjoy the music. So let's talk about this. They are not anywhere near to be as good as the Albrecht Dürer from Faber-Castell. Not even close. They're good, but they are not Faber-Castell. And I had serious problems with them breaking. So, again, burnt carmine, a really nice color to work with, especially as a shadow color. But, I mean, there's, what, half a pencil left? And I haven't used half a pencil. I've sharpened it and it crumbles, and I've tried 3, 4, at least 4 different sharpeners, and it keeps on just crumbling. I don't know if it's just because I got a bad set or something, but I'm a little suspicious that it is actually a quality issue with this whole set, because the white broke on me as well. Carmine Lake broke on me. Not sure about the vermilion, I don't think that did. But both these yellows, the lemon yellow and zinc yellow, also both broke on me. The zinc yellow only once, the lemon yellow twice before I got to a part where it was good. So that's really quite disappointing. They're also not as opaque as the Albrecht Dürer pencil, so I had to put quite a few layers on here until I got to the color intensity that I was happy with. They're nice to lay down, they're very soft, they don't hold a point very well, not on pastel mat at least. But they melt okay and they blend okay, and the color selection is quite nice. But the breakage, if you have followed my channel for any length of time, you know I hate pencils that break when you sharpen them. It is just not okay. The set I got here is one of the sets where my cats have not knocked them on the floor. I haven't dropped them, so they're not broken in my possession. It is, however, one that I ordered on the internet, and I have no idea how it shipped, or how it was handled during shipment, because that can also cause them to break. But I quite frankly think it's because the cores are so soft, and maybe some of them have just not been produced right, so it's not coherent. It is just kind of a crumbly core. I have to say the set is an olderly set, so maybe they have improved it since. I don't know. I'm gonna go and one of these days and buy a new burnt carmine. Our local store in town has some open stock, so I'll try and replace this one and see if a new one is better. So yeah, aside from the breaking, I'm quite happy enough with them, and I don't mind using them. I will probably not use them on colored paper for another time, because that blue from the paper really kept on shining through. And I don't consider that as a quality issue. I consider it as just a trait of, it is watercolor pencils, and watercolors you would normally expect to be transparent. So these are more transparent than the Albrecht Dürer. If you like one or the other is a matter of taste. So I will not hold that against them that they are not opaque. I'll just adjust and use them on white paper in the future. I'm quite happy with the outcome of this, and I don't have any complaints other really than the breaking. So thank you all for watching. Please like, subscribe, and come back for something else.